Once upon a December, Valley Forge, Morristown, Delaware crossing. Once upon a December. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast is a phrase often associated in military action films, featuring the bold tactics of special operations forces, of which long ago I was a part. And in December 1776, the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army was running out of options, having failed to replicate the success of a band of militia at the battles of Lexington and Concord in April 1775, who had managed to inflict severe casualties against a professionally trained military force and force the British to retreat from the city of Boston. A smashing success. The army over which he had assumed command in June 1775 was near the end of their 2-year enlistment contracts and anxious to return home to celebrate holidays with their family and friends, but greatly disheartened, perhaps not ever to return to an army that had failed to find any success at all, just as no leader throughout the world has yet been able to replicate the swift, decisive actions that had found success by the Beijing government in Wuhan and their draconian lockdowns that were implemented to save the world and to prevent the spread of an emerging public health crisis set off by a pneumonia of unknown etiology that became a pandemic pathogen, sprouting off mutant variants of concern. But General George Washington still not only had held on to a hope, but also actually had a plan to conduct a 3-pronged assault across the Delaware River under cover of night on Christmas evening, 1776. But what students of history soon discovered, practically nothing at all about the story of the surprise attack matches the image portrayed in the famous portrait of Washington's crossing. It is displayed in the Emmanuel Lutz 12 by 24 painting on display. 12 feet by 24 feet. Large painting on display at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in Manhattan. And in retrospection of history, written by victors, not victims, few things appear as they actually were at the time. So classified. The first surprising fact to learn about the Delaware Crossing tale is that the Hessian garrison of 1,400 troops in Trenton, under the command of Colonel Johann Rall, did not wake up surprised at all, had actually been warned by British Major General James Grant, who with great sense of urgency had warned them to be on alert after receiving information from a spy whose identity, like the animal origins of a novel coronavirus and even its infectious dose, is still unknown to scientists today, and who was encamped with General Washington in Pennsylvania, a spy and traitor lurking within his ranks. Colonel Rall was also forewarned by at least 2 deserters who had crossed the Delaware River with the attacking force of George Washington and had raced ahead to provide early warning, traitors amongst them and the rebel cause who had escaped undetected. But a certain Hessian bravado of the commander compelled him to lend short, shrill effect to the warnings, dismissing them with the reply, "Let them come. Why defenses? We shall go at them with bayonets." But history validates that Colonel Rall's hope was not a plan. And like the president's plan for a 3-month national mask mandate, and even his American rescue plan to achieve 70% herd immunity by Independence Day, has been thwarted by a virus that apparently isn't stupid, according to CDC Director Rochelle Walensky. And since June, with over 85% of persons over the age of 65 fully vaccinated, they still account for over 73% of the fatalities. Very different from the picture that we hear in the news. And the only answer of the president is to go at them with boosters. Because, as he believes, and perhaps you too, vaccines have always worked. And perhaps Americans just require a little more. Another surprising fact for students about the Delaware Crossing is that there were actually 3 forces encamped in Pennsylvania who had attempted the bold crossing. Colonel John Cadwalader, commander of the 3rd Militia of Philadelphia, and a doctor's son from Trenton, was encamped across the river from Burlington, New Jersey, with his 1,200 men, reinforced by a force of 600 from the Continental Army. His orders were to cross the Delaware and to harass British regulars and Hessian mercenaries to prevent them from reinforcing the Hessians encamped at Trenton. General James Ewing and his force of 600 were on orders to cross the river and to take up defensive positions to support the battle along the Assunpink River and bridge. But in a snowstorm of light drizzle that quickly turned into a torrent of driving rain, the ice-choked river became simply impassable, and neither force was able on that Christmas evening to work a miracle and complete their mission. Similarly, not widely known about the battle for independence from a novel coronavirus, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, two litigation battles were commenced near the beginning of public health crisis response. One attack commenced in the circuit court for the city of Alexandria in April 2020, very early on, against the lockdowns, and the other attack commenced against the facial coverings orders in June 2020 in the federal district court in Richmond against the facial coverings mandates have been working their way slowly through the courts and appeals, engaging in aggressive fire and maneuver to arrive at the United States Supreme Court. The first arriving shortly before Thanksgiving in the facial coverings challenge, followed by the lockdown challenge arriving just a week ago. But exchange of briefs and oral arguments and writing opinions at the Supreme Court take a lot of time, so progress on those actions may take a little while, and it is significant that not even one of those actions has been mentioned by the press, who were also not big fans of a former president. But probably the biggest surprise to students of the Delaware Crossing, the battle that turned the tide of the entire Revolutionary War, is that despite the way it appears in the large portrait, the point at which General Washington chose to cross the river measured only a short span of about 300 yards, and at most times of the year you could actually walk across the shallow water. But General Washington had a grand strategic vision for the Battle of Trenton. He wanted to restore the morale of his troops, and he asked them to stay on with their missing Christmas with their families at home. He wanted to get the town invested, so he called upon them to assist Colonel John Glover's Marblehead Regiment of experienced New England seamen, lending them their ferries, watercraft, and especially their shallow draft Durham boats, which were cargo vessels measuring 40 to 60 feet long, weighing practically a ton, which were cargo vessels designed to move iron and bulk goods downriver, and capable of transporting large artillery pieces that General Washington wanted in great quantities to support him in the battle, and which may have gotten bogged down in the mire and muddy shallow river if they tried to walk across, where he waited patiently for a storm actually to begin and for the water to rise. It took a half hour for sorties of watercraft to make the round trip across that 300-yard span and back. Over 30 sorties were made to cross the river, where a bridge stands today connecting both sides. And General Washington was 3 hours behind schedule when he finally completed that task. None of his supporting units made it across the river to support the battle at Trenton, where spies encamped with them in Pennsylvania had provided early warnings to the enemy. And sitting by a warm fire on the New Jersey side of the crossing, General Washington actually considered the option to call off the entire attack. But fortune favors the bold in battle. Crisis is a marriage of danger and opportunity, and he didn't. And the rest, as they say, is history. On December 16th at around 3 p.m., the action that had been commenced against vaccine challenge in the federal district court after the celebration of Independence Day was able to branch off a special application from its current encampment as the Fourth Circuit to join the other actions against the lockdowns and facial covering mandates on the hilltop of the Supreme Court. Unencumbered by the conventional scientific arguments required in the facial coverings and lockdown challenges required to defeat what is described by attorneys as regulatory deference doctrine, This light force special operations attack is advancing on the shadow docket for a prejudgment before the decision on the appeal that is currently at the Fourth Circuit against the vaccine's mandates. It is a simple FOIA case about a FOIA request that required a simple yes or no response. And the only question that the Supreme Court need answer at this point is a yes or no question. Did the White House issue a reply to a FOIA request? Or an explanation as to why it has not done so since March? Yes or no, yay or nay, up or down to Sesame Street simple. And just like massing on an objective and surprise simplicity is one of the 9 principles of war. Credible evidence exists that several felonies were committed by the trial court to quash the action that is now before the Chief Justice for the Supreme Court. Credible evidence exists to corroborate the fact that the White House did engage in obstruction of justice and had unlawfully made a tasking to the intelligence community impeachable crimes. And all of these actions appear to have arisen from the simple fact that the FOIA request was specifically designed to determine, without the use of any scientific knowledge, the origins and ownership of the causative agent that has been attributed to the fatalities of over 800,000 Americans, over 5 million worldwide, and for which the vaccines have been marketed, at least, as a plan to prevent this occurrence and tragedy, even though they have failed to do so thus far. And the White House has yet to issue any explanation why any crimes would be required in a plan to stop a zoonotically evolved virus. But perhaps in the new year, he can come out to court to provide an explanation of satisfaction. And in the meantime, be advised that he does still have a right to remain silent. This briefing is unclassified. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, next year, make the right choice and follow me. We shall make America great again. Honest. Have yourself a merry little Christmas now. And y'all come back now. Yeah. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.
Thunk, I could have had a vaccine.